welcome back. So I have a few announcements for you guys. First off, if you haven't read through my email or had questions on that, all of my math labs for chapters 1 through 4 are open until April 6th. And so you can go back and work on any old homework. I also gave you one more chance on all of the quizzes, so you can improve both your homework and your quiz scores for chapters 1 through 4. We will be finishing up chapter 5 next week, but my math labs are not due until April 12th. So you guys have plenty of time to do that. Because of that, these are hard deadlines. So be sure that you are staying on top of things and not waiting until April 11th or 12th to do all of your chapter 5 My Math Labs. At the end of each video, I'll give you guys a couple practice problems to do. And so today we're just going to be reviewing sections 1 through 4 that we've already covered in class from before break. So I'll put a couple practice problems at the end just for you guys to try to do that. As far as tests go, we haven't heard back anything from ACC as of yet. I know the district is also going to be meeting up, I think, tomorrow. And so hopefully by the beginning of next week, we'll have an update for you guys. But as of right now, we don't know what we're doing as far as tests and finals and all of that stuff goes. And so, yeah, on to reviewing content. So with chapter 5, because we are moving to remote learning, we are not going to be focusing on verifying, which will hopefully be good news for you guys. But we do still need to know how to use these identities and formulas. So I will be putting up the formula sheet on Google Classroom. I'll also give you my formula sheet, which has the definitions, the quotient identities, reciprocal identities, and cofunctions. Whenever we have office hours, or depending on what we're doing, I do have a whiteboard that'll have the identities that we've already covered. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at some review problems. So give me a second to pull up my iPad on OneNote. Okay, so in section 1, we were just talking about our reciprocal identities, quotient identities, stuff like that. Remembering that anytime that it gives you a problem where it gives you cosine, sine, tangent of theta equals a value and then a quadrant, you always want to draw a triangle. And so we're going to be using that again when we're talking in 5.3 and 5.4. And so section 2 is all about verifying identities. And so you still need to do this for my math lab, and that's why I've labeled all of the identities with the quotient identity, reciprocal identity, and so on the formula sheets. So that's helpful for my math lab, but just know that you will not really have to be doing any of this kind of stuff for a test or an in-person quiz. So then we have our sum and difference identities. So these are the big ones that we've talked about before break. And so just remembering that if we have cosine A plus B, it's cosine A, cosine B minus sine A, sine B. So with our cosine sum and differences, the sine value, so if it's adding or subtracting, is going to be opposite. Whereas whenever we have sine of A plus B or sine of A minus B, we have different signs. So let's go ahead and just look at some practice problems from both 5.3 and 5.4. So let's look at cosine of negative 75 degrees. So with this, we want to think about what our A and our B values are that we can add or subtract two values to get negative 75. And so I know that 30 and 45 are part of our unit circle. And so I'm going to break this up to be cosine, oops. So cosine of negative 35, or sorry, negative 30 degrees plus negative 45 degrees. So this is my A is negative 30. My B is negative 45. So then I'm going to do cosine of negative 30, cosine of negative 45, minus sine, and so again, I'm just using my sum and difference identities. I'm using this top one, cosine A plus B. So then sine of negative 30 sine of negative 45. Now, for these values, negative 30 is going to be where we go opposite 30 degrees. So then this point is going to be negative root 3, oh wait, this is going to be a positive root 3 over 2 and a negative 1/2. Then for negative 45, this is going to be positive root 2 over 2, negative root 2 over 2. So when I'm looking at cosine of negative 30, I want my x value for negative 30. So this is going to be root 3 over 2. And then for cosine of negative 45, then I'm going to have my x value of the negative 45. So then this would be root 2 over 2. Then minus, so now I want my y value. So then this will be negative 1/2, and then negative root 2 over 2. So we simplify this, and again, we want the exact answer. And so this is going to be root 3 times root 2 is going to give me root 6 over 4. A negative times a negative is a positive, but then we're subtracting. So this will still be a minus root 2 over 4. And so then the only way that we can really simplify it is just by writing it as one fraction, like so, and that is our answer. And so again, just to clarify, so when I take the square root of 3 times the square root of 2, I get the square root of 6, because you multiply what is on the inside. So now let's look at one where we are adding or subtracting with radians. So if we have, So let's do example 2. So cosine of 17 pi over 12. So again, let's think about what we can add together to get 17, but then when we put it over 12 can reduce to something on our unit circle. So if we think about 7 and 10, well, 7 over 12 doesn't reduce, so we don't want that. Thought process behind this. I want to think about, so if we do 4 over 12 plus 13 over 12, this gives us 17 over 12, but because this doesn't reduce, we don't want that. So then if we do 6 over 12 and 9 over 12, this would give us 17 over 12, and both of these reduce. So guys, find roommates like this who bring you home Chick-fil-A. Cheers. So she's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we want to use 6 pi over 12 and 9 pi over 12, because then the 6 pi over 12 reduces to pi over 2, and then 9 pi over 12 reduces to 3 pi over 4. So then we can write this as cosine of pi over 2 plus 3 pi over 4. Thank you. And so then using, again, our sum and difference, this is going to be cosine pi over 2 cosine 3 pi over 4 minus sine pi over 2 sine 3 pi over 4. And so then cosine of pi over 2, so again, use your unit circle. So cosine of pi over 2 is 0. Cosine of 3 pi over 4 is going to be negative root 2 over 2. Sine of pi over 2 is 1. Sine of 3 pi over 4 is root 2 over 2. So then 0 times anything, this is just going to give us 0 minus root 2 over 2. So then our answer would be negative root 2 over 2. Okay, so then let's do one more problem where we have our triangles. So this is similar to, let's go down here and look at it. So it's similar to this one, where we're given a value for sine and cosine. We're given the quadrant that each of them are in, and then we want to find sine A minus B, tangent A minus B, and what quadrant it's in. So let's go over here. And so we are going to do cosine of A is negative 7 over 25. And then pi is less than A is less than 3 pi over 2. And then sine of A is equal to negative 3 over 5. And then, sorry, this is B. And then 3 pi over 2 is less than b is less than 2 pi. Okay, so with these problems, the first thing that we want to do is find our triangles for both A and for B. So if we look at A, so between pi and 3 pi over 2, that is going to be our third quadrant. So for angle A, I'm going to draw out my triangle. So if cosine is negative 7 over 25, that means that this is going to be negative 7. My r is 25. And so then if we do the Pythagorean theorem, so negative 7 squared plus y squared equals 25 squared. So then I'm going to go to my graphing calculator and take 25 squared minus negative 7 squared. Enter, and then I want to take the square root of that answer. So that's going to be 24. Now, because we are in the third quadrant, we know that y could be plus or minus 24. And because we're in the third quadrant, it has to be a negative 24. Then 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi, that's going to be in quadrant 4. So then I draw my triangle. This is going to be negative 3 over 5. That means this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle, so this is a positive 4. And so then we have everything we need for angle A and for angle B. Now, back to the actual problem. The first thing that we want to do is find sine of A minus B. So then again, we use our sum and difference identities. So this is going to be sine of A cosine B minus cosine A sine B. And so then this is where we look at our triangles. So for sine of A, that is going to be negative 24 over 25. Now, notice I'm not writing sine of negative 24 over 25. I'm writing the value for sine of A. And so that would be opposite over hypotenuse, or y over r. And then for cosine of B, I'm going to look at my triangle for B, and this is going to be 4 over 5. And minus cosine of A is negative 7 over 25. Sine of B is negative 3 over 5. So then at this point, we could type this into our graphing calculator. And minus negative times a negative is a positive. And so then this would be negative 117 over 125. And so then for B, we want to find tangent of A minus B. And so then this would be tangent A minus tangent B all over 1 minus tangent A, tangent B. And so then for tangent of A, this would be, so a negative over a negative is going to be positive, so this is going to be 24 over 7 minus negative 3 over 4. And again, I'm pulling this from, so this is coming from this triangle. And then over 1 minus 24 over 7, negative 3 over 4. And so then at this point, we can just type all of this into our calculator. And so my suggestion is to use the alpha y equals on your calculator and type this all in. And so then when we do this, we end up getting that this is equal to negative 117 over 44. And so then the last thing that we want to do is state the quadrant that A minus B is in. And so this is where we want to think about our all students take calculus. And so if sine of A minus B is negative and tangent of A minus B is negative. So we want to think about what quadrant. So sine is negative and tangent is negative. So then A minus B must be in quadrant 4. Okay, so I will post a few, or it's just a couple questions on Google Classroom for you guys to practice this stuff. And then I will hopefully see you guys on Friday or on Thursday for our office hours. So have a good day.